The way that I run these classes is very interactive. You can ask me questions anytime you want to ask me questions. If you don't know a word, then just let me know, okay? Now let's go back to the brain and sugar. Yes, sugar is very important for the brain. The brain actually is unique in the sense that we actually burn a lot of calories when we think. And if you ever go outside and see a man with not a lot of hair on his head, you're going to see steam coming out of his head because the brain is actually burning a lot of calories. In fact, about 70% of all calories that we burn are from thinking. So it takes a lot of energy to think. And so doing crossword puzzles or doing a lot of thinking, learning a foreign language, in theory, will help you lose weight and burn calories, okay? Because your brain does need a lot of energy to operate properly, and of course it burns a lot of sugar, and if we don't get the right amount of sugar in our brain, then we could go into a coma. Diabetics have that problem. I knew a diabetic in Kiev, and he was actually attending one of my discussions, and he started asking me very bizarre questions during the discussion. Almost like he was drunk, almost like he was on drugs. And I realized that he was actually going through a coma. Come on in. He was actually going through some kind of coma or diabetic seizure. And I had to give him, what would I give him in that case? What did I need to give this guy to come out of his problem? I needed to give him what? Sugar. I had a Snicker bar in my bag. I pulled the Snicker bar out and literally stuck it into his mouth, and I forced him to chew on the Snicker, and within a few minutes of swallowing the Snicker bar, he started to come out of his diabetic seizure. But had I not been there, and I had not given him that sugar, he would have probably had some serious, serious problems that could have led to his death. So a diabetic has to always have a little sugar on hand, just in case they start slipping into a diabetic coma, okay? So we're going to take care of the brain, and how else are we going to take care of our brain? What else can we do to take care of our brain? We talked about drinking a lot of water, and since the brain is made up of fat, what would be something good to eat? Come on, what is a Ukrainian delicacy?
Salo.
Salo. Actually, you know, salo may not be that great for the heart, but it actually, a little bit of salo is actually pretty good for the brain. But the best is fish. Yeah, fish oil. And I know that Ukrainians typically don't take things like fish oil, but if you eat salmon every day, and that's probably going to not only help you think better, but it may help prevent something like Alzheimer's. Okay, do you guys know what Alzheimer's is? Did you forget what Alzheimer's is? Did somebody forget what it is? I think I forgot what it is. Actually, that's a bad joke. Alzheimer's is a disease that affects memory, usually in older people, okay? And they say that eating fish and consuming fish oil over the course of your lifetime will delay the onset of Alzheimer's, okay? And by the way, your brain works the best at about your age, okay? In fact, actually when you're younger is the best time to learn languages. If you're just starting to learn English now, it's going to be a little bit harder. If you start when you're very young, your brain is more wide open, and it's much easier to learn a foreign language when you're 3, 4, and 5 years old. For somebody in my age group to learn Russian would require a tremendous amount of mental concentration, okay? Because my brain is kind of already hardwired in English, and it's a little harder to learn a foreign language really well, okay? So the earlier, come on in, the earlier you learn a foreign language, the better, okay? Your brain is also better able to focus and concentrate when you're younger, okay? And another thing you probably should do, the brain is actually very fragile. And that's the reason we have a very hard skull. our skull is actually protecting our brain. And what we don't want to do is have any kind of head trauma. But every day in Ukraine, kids are doing something that's probably not very good for their brain. And what would it be?
Smoke.
Well, smoking is not good for your brain, and certainly not good when you're pregnant to smoke, because we know that women who smoke a lot during pregnancy, their fetus does not get as much oxygen as required, okay? So you may damage the brain of your fetus. But can you think of something that kids do here, adults do, a lot of Ukrainian boys do, and some Ukrainian girls do, that might not be very good for your brain?
Drinking?
What?
Drinking
Large amounts of alcohol is definitely not good for your brain. They have looked at the brains of alcoholics, and that process is called an autopsy, where they will actually look at the brain of a person who's been using alcohol their whole life, and they will see that the brain of an alcoholic, upon death, is about 20% smaller than somebody that's a non-alcoholic. And there is a disease called alcohol-induced dementia. Now, dementia is a disease that affects memory and blood circulation to the brain. But to make the point here that alcohol is definitely in large quantities not good for the brain. It kills brain cells, and that's one of the reasons why people lose hand-eye coordination when they've been drinking, okay? Because brain cells are actually being wiped out, okay? But there's something else that young people do here that's really not healthy for the brain. And it's a sport. What sport? There's actually two sports that are probably very bad for the brain. Boxing is very bad. And if you look at some boxers who are a little bit old now, like Muhammad Ali, he's got Parkinson's. And that's probably because he's been hit so many times in the head. And unfortunately, although the Klitschko's seem to be very bright, intelligent men, they are very at risk for dementia, Alzheimer's as they get older because they've taken so many blows to the head. It's not good. But what else could cause a little fissure on your brain? If you're hit with this thing enough times, what else could cause problems? Soccer ball. Actually, it's not good to use your head as a club on a soccer ball. Imagine how fast those balls are traveling, and you're using your head to hit that ball. Every time you do that, you jar your brain just a little bit. It's going to cause some problems. They've looked at Italian soccer players that played soccer their whole life, and they're finding when they do these studies, when these players are in their 60s and 70s, that they don't score very well on certain academic tests. Their memories are not as good. Their comprehension is not as good. And so we know that there seems to be some brain damage on individuals that played soccer throughout their life and professionally. And we probably need to take a look at that. American football is also notorious for that. We're finding that people who played American football, where that's a collision contact sport, that they have high rates of Parkinson's, dementia, early onsets of Alzheimer's. So you want to protect your brain. Your skull can do a pretty good job of that, but it doesn't do a perfect job. You don't want to abuse it with sports that bang your head, okay? So we want to feed our brain with the right foods. We want to drink a lot of water. We want to avoid smoking and alcohol. We don't want to use our head as a club on a soccer ball if possible, but of course, if you're playing soccer, it's absolutely necessary. So these are important concepts in trying to take care of your brain if possible, okay? And again, my feeling has always been that the brain is the center of our universe. It's the most important thing any of us have. Without a healthy brain, we are lost, we're hopeless. We need a healthy brain to function in this world. It's a complex world we live in with all kinds of problems, and we can't solve those problems if our brain does not work well. And our brain is very sensitive. It's full of chemicals and neuropeptides and neurotransmitters, and if these things get a little bit out of balance, then we not only don't think straight, but we have problems with depression and anxiety and things like that. So keeping your brain healthy is the best thing that you can do to increase your happiness levels and your overall productivity in life, okay? So enough said about that. I'm going to keep moving down here. So we talked about the brain as a muscle and that thinking is a skill, and unfortunately for the people that might be watching this, they can't see the overheads. But thinking is probably a skill that not all of us have mastered well, and yet it is a highly important skill. And we can improve our thinking by doing certain things, okay? Now, one concept in thinking is looking at this photo, and when we look at critical thinking, one of the concepts is that there's oftentimes, when we look at something, there may be two possibilities or more. And one of the things that critical thinkers do is they understand that two people could be looking at the same image and see two very different things. So I want you guys to tell me what you see in this photo.
Old man.
You see an old man. What?
But it could be
Old
a
man.
nature or something like that.
A couple of guy and girl who kiss each other.
All right, yeah, so now you see the old man, and you see two
Yeah,
people
but
kissing.
first I saw the old guy.
Yeah, and most people, actually, most people see the old man first. Come on in. Most people see the old man first, and they don't see the people kissing. All right, and some people cannot see the people kissing at all. Does anybody not see the people kissing? Does anybody not see those kissing people?
No, I can't see the...
Yeah, you know, one of the problems is once you get locked in, once you start looking at something, it's hard to see something else. So the old man is obvious. It's obvious that you can see the old man, but some individuals cannot see the two people kissing, right? Now, who cannot see the two people kissing?
And you cannot.
What? No, we got one honest person here.
I can.
You can't, all right?
I can.
You can't. Anybody else? I'm sure there are other people. Can you guys see the people kissing?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, what's happening here is our brain gets focused in on one thing and can't see the other thing. This guy has a particularly flexible brain, okay? But a lot of people, when they get locked in on something, they can't see the alternative. And part of critical thinking is to understand that two people can see the same situation, but they can see it very differently. Now, the question is, how do we, you can see the arrow, right? This is the head of the man kissing the girl who's right here. Now their lips are coming together right there. Their lips are coming together right there. And their arms are coming together right here. Do you want to demonstrate that with her? No, I'm sorry. Okay.
Maybe later.
Maybe later. Okay. Now do you guys see it? Now does everybody see it? Now be honest with me. Everybody sees it, right?
Yeah.
All right. So the point in this exercise is, well, what is the point? The point is that two people can see the same thing, and they can see it very differently. I often use this particular image when individuals might have a conflict with each other. I'd say, okay, one of you sees it this way, one of you sees it that way. Who's right? Both of them could be right. So both people could see the same situation, they could see it totally different, but both be right. And I think that is one of the things that you need to keep in mind when we talk about critical thinking, is that our point of view could be wrong, or it could, and their point of view could be right. And so we always have to put ourselves in the position of the other person. They have a right to their own opinion and feelings. And what they see and what they think is just as valid as what we see and what we think. And critical thinkers understand that basic concept, okay? That everybody can see the world in a way that's best for them, but we should we should allow that they have that chance to do that, okay? And I'm going to keep moving with these slides. And again, you guys can stop me at any point. What does thinking tell us? Well, basically, thinking tells us everything. Can you guys read that? Because it seems a little bit out of focus. Maybe that's a little bit better.
Can you do a full screen?
I can do a full screen if you want.
It's better.
And that's better, okay? I just have to figure out where, okay, I think I can, okay. Oh shit, sorry. If you can erase that, that would be fine. Okay, I hope that, okay, what comes first? I'm not sure I can go back, that's the problem. Well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, okay. What does thinking tell us? It tells us all these things, okay? What is important, what is unimportant, who our friends are, who are our enemies, and why they are our enemies. Sometimes people mix up. Sometimes our enemies are actually our friends, and vice versa. Okay? So our thinking tells us everything about the world. And our brain is actually designed to make judgments. It's designed to process reality. All of us are processing reality all the time. We're trying to figure out what's going on in this very complex, difficult world. Okay? And it is a complex world. There's a lot of stuff happening out there, and our brain is trying to figure it out. It's trying to process that information and tries to help us make good decisions, because we are also creatures of survival and we need to survive. So our brain is making these very quick decisions to help us survive and have a little bit better life, okay? All right, what comes first? A thought or a feeling or a behavior? What do you think comes first?
Feeling.
You think a feeling comes first? Some people would agree with you. I won't.
It depends on, I mean...
But where do our feelings come from? Don't our feelings come from our thoughts? I believe that every feeling comes from a thought. Okay? Every feeling comes from a thought. And we go from a thought to a feeling to maybe a behavior. Or we go from a thought to a feeling to another thought to another feeling. And we can go back and forth, okay? But I think that our thoughts control our feelings. When we have a thought about something, automatically that thought is going to produce some kind of feeling. And what is a feeling? How do we define a feeling? A feeling is something that happens inside of us, like an emotion. And most feelings do produce some minor physiological change inside of us. When we have a thought, there's a tiny little reaction in our brain that causes some feeling, and if it's an intense feeling, we can actually really feel it. What would be an example of a very intense feeling that some people have? What?
Happiness.
Happiness is very intense. I would call joy a very intense feeling.
Love.
Love can be an intense feeling. It can be extremely intense, but the problem with love is that love can be a positive emotion, but it can also be a negative emotion. It can be an unpleasant feeling. I know just as many people that have an unpleasant feeling when they're in love than a pleasant feeling. It's not always pleasant. It's just very, very strong. Anger is another very intense feeling, and that's something you're all going to have to deal with. You're all going to have to figure out how to manage your anger, because anger is the stupidest emotion possible. When we get angry, we get very stupid and we make very bad decisions. And you should make decisions when you're angry, and you should watch what you say when you're angry, okay? You know, I've never seen it like this, where each time I press it, I have to, okay. So, critical thinking is a problem-solving skill. It really starts with an observation, and we begin to process it. Obviously, part of critical thinking has to do with logic and seeing alternatives, okay? So in any given situation, what you want to do is look at your alternatives, okay? And that's probably one of the best ways to help a friend. If they come to you with a problem, you ask the person, all right, let's look at the alternatives here. What can you do? and what can't you do in this situation? What are the consequences to each decision that you make, okay? So I always try to help a person see their options and alternatives in any situation. Does that make sense? Because I think when a person is having trouble, they don't see their options and alternatives. That's one of the reasons they get in trouble, is because they don't see all their possibilities. And so we want to try to point those out, okay? So this is the process of critical thinking, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but everything pretty much starts with an observation. And one of the things that we have to be aware of is that there's a difference between a fact and an opinion. What is the difference between a fact and an opinion?
Opinion is facts, but in your inside of you.
Yeah, an opinion is something that is more subjective.
Yeah.
Would you like something to drink?
I'll take a coffee, if you don't mind.
Кава, чай, сік.
Yeah,
До соку обов'язково солодке щось. Як бонус. Окей? Бельгійський вафлі прийшли.
I mean, a cappuccino would be okay for me, yeah.
Зможете бачити. Чорний зелений.
You guys, you're welcome to ask me questions during these breaks here. Anybody have questions?
I have a question. Your opinion with diabetes.
Yep.
Власне, більше не буде пояснення.
Sugar is forbidden.
Банани як?
Yeah, you know, the diabetic has to be very careful with sugar. Okay, they have to be very careful with sugar, and sometimes the problem is that their body isn't producing it, and they have to actually eat sugar in order to avoid a coma. Now, typically insulin, if they are monitoring their insulin, that controls their blood sugar level. But some diabetics forget to take insulin, or they use alcohol that disrupts the insulin, and then they have to use sugar to avoid some kind of major problems. But yeah, diabetes is generally a problem with having too high blood sugar levels, okay? And that's one of the things that you guys want to look at, is to keep an eye on your blood sugar levels, okay? But we need some sugar to function. Sugar provides energy, our brain needs energy, and if we don't get it, the brain can shut down. Okay, but, yeah. So, again, one of the things that we're going to be looking at in critical thinking is that we all want to make these quick, rapid decisions, and what we need to do is try to focus on the facts. We need to try to keep some of our emotions under control when we make decisions. And we need to, we need to figure out where the source of our information is coming from. And we need to be aware of our personal biases as well, okay? Non-ego-based thought is simply that when we have too big an ego, and what do we mean by ego? Yes, right. If our ego is too big and we think too much of ourselves, and yeah, if we love our opinions too much, then we don't consider other people's opinions. So yeah, it's good to believe in yourself, but I think one of the qualities that I really like in people is the willingness to admit that you could be wrong. And that's one thing that I had to learn in order to be a better thinker, was that my thoughts could be wrong. That any thought that I have could be wrong. And sometimes I have to change my ideas. I have to say, look, I learned something today. I didn't know that. Or I thought this when it really was that. So we have to be open to being influenced by other people. We have to be open to other people's opinions, and that they may know more than we do. And what I have found with non-critical thinkers is they think they know all the answers. They think they know it all. And a person who thinks they know it all cannot learn. They're very stubborn in that way, and they will not learn new ideas. And so we always want to be open to new information. When we make a decision about something and we say, this is my opinion and that's it, then we close ourselves to any new information that might help us make a better decision. It's actually called confirmatory bias. So you want to stay flexible, you want to keep an open mind, you want to be available to new information. You might think that a person's not a very nice person. But if you get information that suggests that your opinion could be wrong about that person, then you need to say, look, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is not a bad person. Maybe they're actually a pretty good person. And that's why first impressions can be dangerous. Because what is the biggest problem with first impressions?
You never know what happens next.
Yeah, they're resistant to change. When we make an opinion or decision about another person, we tend not to change that opinion of them. Even when new information comes available that suggests that our opinion is wrong. So we always want to be available to new information. We are scientists. All of us are investigators. We're investigating this world. We're trying to figure out what is true and what is not true. We can't do that if we are closed to new information. We've got to let that new information come to us, even though it's not what we want to hear. Okay? All right, we are all scientists. I love Lvov, and I'm going to prove it's a great city. All right? Well, I made that comment because if we want to prove something that we think is true, we are only going to look at the positive aspects of Lvov, right? We're only going to take all the things about Lvov that we like and forget anything that might be negative about Lvov. And that's just the way people are. We grab onto an opinion and we only look at the things that support our decision. We don't take into consideration things that might not support our decision. Does that make sense? Are you guys picking up on that? It's a very simple concept, but people have a hard time following that, okay? Okay. And when we look at solutions, sometimes there are no good solutions, sometimes there are no easy solutions, sometimes we simply have to take the solution that is the lesser of two evils, okay? Always understanding that whatever we do could be wrong, okay? And I had to learn that as a psychologist and as a social worker, that I would have to make decisions, I'd have to make judgments on people, but it was important sometimes to acknowledge that I could be wrong, and sometimes I did make mistakes. And as long as you are open to the fact that you're not God, and none of us are God, God is probably the only one that really doesn't make mistakes. And I'm not sure there is a God to begin with, but none of us are God. We're all fallible. We all think in a crooked way. Some of us think more clearly than others, but none of us are perfect. And as long as we keep that in mind, as long as we tell ourselves that in any given situation, I could be wrong, then we're open to new information, and that's what's going to make us successful, okay? I'm going to move quickly on here. Qualities of good thinkers, and let me just throw that out to you. What are qualities of good thinkers? You don't have to necessarily look at this, but what would be some qualities of a good thinker? Somebody who thinks well.
You must analyze all facts around his.
All right, you make an analysis of the facts as best you can. As best you can. Sometimes we can't always do that.